Are you a boy or are you a girl? This is the question that I've been followed around with for the majority of my life. And for most people, it's probably a preposterous question that they wouldn't imagine that strangers on the street would just come up and ask them. Little children sometimes would make comments, and that's not a big deal, but it's more so the adults that would really just not be able to let go of this concept of needing to know what my biology is. And therein is why the question is so shocking to me. They're not actually asking what my gender identity is. They're asking what I was assigned at birth. They're asking what my physical parts are, which when you think about it is a really creepy question. So I'm going to go over a little bit about what we're talking about when it comes to gender. And it's not just your biology. Gender has many levels, and on each one of these levels, it's a continuum. You could fall anywhere on that continuum, from one end to the other, or anywhere in between. And it does start with your biological sex, which is what you're assigned at birth. When you came out and the doctor said, it's a boy, it's a girl, based on your biology. Now, you could be on one end and be male, you could be on the other end and be female, or you could fall in the middle and you could be intersex. And there are over 27 different ways that people could be intersex and fall in between the actual biology of what's male and what's female. On the next level down is gender identity. And this is actually how you feel on the inside, how you identify. On the one end is man, on the other end is woman, and then in between are folks like myself. We identify as non-binary. Sometimes they use the term gender fluid or gender queer, which I think sometimes makes people cringe because the word queer is still a little bit on the brink of a lot of people thinking that is a derogatory term. I used to refer to myself before I knew any of this terminology as a gender bender. I just thought it sounded neat. It kind of rhymed, it was kind of a funny little thing, and I would make jokes, and I would say to my coworkers, yes, it's me, I'm here, I'm your official gender bender at your service. Underneath that is gender expression, and that's what you're showing to the world. Now, the way I present myself to the world is on the more masculine end of the spectrum, but still closer to the middle. So there's masculine on one end, feminine on the other, and all kinds of levels of androgyny in between. Underneath that is gender presentation. And this is the thing that I have no control over whatsoever. That's how I'm being perceived by the outside world. So even though I'm presenting myself in a more masculine way, that's not always what's perceived. I've had instances where I've been sitting in restaurants with my wife, and people are staring, and they're whispering, or they're pointing, or they're looking. It's obvious they're talking. And a lot of times I can take that with a grain of salt and not even really notice, but there are other times where I really just want to turn around and say, if you have a burning question, would you please just ask it so we could all move on with our day? That would be great. So gender presentation is sort of one of those levels that I wish I had a little bit more control of, and I don't really have the time to walk around addressing every single person in the room and saying, this is what I want you to see. So I just let people see what they want and go on about their day. It's fine with me. I'm not bothered if you see me as female. I'm not bothered if you see me as male, because I exist right in that gray area in the middle of feeling like I don't explicitly subscribe to one end or the other when it comes to that continuum. And on the last level is sexual orientation, and this, of course, is who you have feelings for, who you like or love. And again, that's a spectrum. You could be attracted to women, you could be attracted to men, you could be bisexual, you could be pansexual. And that has nothing to do at all with how you identify yourself gender-wise. Each one of these levels are completely independent. They're not in any way involved with the other levels. You can be on one end or the other end of any one of these, or in the middle, and they're not really related to each other. So that's just sort of the background on this whole idea. And now I'm going to take you through my gender journey. So that's me. I'm about 2 years old, maybe closer to 3. I was really obsessed with rainbows, completely coincidental, by the way, nothing to do with the fact that I'm gay. And when I came out, my mother was shocked and surprised, and she couldn't believe it. And then I look back at all these childhood photos, and everything is covered in rainbows, and I'm just like, Mom, you didn't do that to me. I picked those things out. Were clues along the way, maybe a little bit. There I am. I'm about 5 years old there, and at about that age, I was completely obsessed with dresses. I had to wear a dress every single day. I had a specific favorite one. It was pink. It had a panda on it, and my mother had to wash it every single day because it's the only thing I would wear. And I would always joke around with her and say, Mom, see, a person is only given so many days in their life that they want to wear a dress. I just used all mine up in 1 year, and then I was spent. I'm about 10 years old here, and this was the year that, or around that time, I begged my mother to let me cut my hair. I think everybody in the early 90s had some version of that bowl cut. And I thought it was so awesome because now I didn't have all this kind of hair getting in the way. I was really into soccer, and I wanted to play all the sports that boys played. And people would actually ask me, do you just want to be a boy? And I used to look them squarely in the face and say, I do not want to be a boy, but I want to be treated like one. And now looking back on that, it's interesting that at that time and at such a young age, I was noticing the differences in how boys were treated and perceived versus girls. I was constantly being told that I couldn't do all these things that I really wanted to do because girls don't do that. I want to play with Legos. They're not for girls. I want to play hockey. That's not for girls. Can I go out for the football team? No, that's not for girls. I want to wear a white suit on Easter. That's not for girls. Drove me crazy. And I went to Catholic school my entire life. So I did have to wear a dress every single day for years. And this really was a sort of sticking point for me because I even went to the dean and had this big argument about how in the dress code it did not explicitly say that the girls had to wear the girls' uniform, just that we had to be in uniform. Now I feel like that was like, open book there for me to go and buy the boys' uniform and wear it. Technically I'd still be in uniform. I wasn't allowed to do that though, I got in big trouble. When I turned about 13, I sort of allowed myself to float back on that continuum towards presenting more feminine. That was about the time where the teasing hit critical mass and I just couldn't take being picked on anymore. It was really difficult. I was a late bloomer, and so the girls would tease me and the boys would tease me about my appearance, so I grew my hair long again, and I started wearing clothes that were a little more traditionally from the girls section, and it worked. The teasing pretty much stopped, and when I went into high school, I was mostly hanging out with the athletic, popular girls. I was friends with all of them. Nobody teased me. There were no questions. I didn't have any problems. But I felt like I was wearing a straitjacket every single day. And it brought me down to a level of depression where I started thinking that I was never going to be allowed to be the person that I wanted to be, that I didn't really have a choice because if I was the person that I wanted to be, I would have to go back to those times when the kids would just relentlessly pick and tease me. And also, my mom had a lot to deal with because there was a lot of judgment where she was concerned. People would look at her or ask her, say, why are you letting your kid dress like that? Why are you letting your kid do that? And so she took a lot of judgment from people that she didn't necessarily know, or even people that she thought were friends of hers that she couldn't believe would come up to her and be judging her decisions on her parenting based on the way that her child wanted to be treated or wanted to behave. And I have to give her a lot of credit for the most part, really standing up and allowing me to join and do most of the things that I wanted to do. The rule was always, I will let you try out. And if you don't make the team, you don't make the team. But if you make the team, I'm going to let you play. So that was really great on her part, that she allowed me to really branch out and try all the things that I wanted to try. There was a lot of compromising where clothing was concerned because I went to a very strict Catholic school, we had appearances to keep up, and when it came to specific holidays and events, we had to do a lot of compromising on what I was allowed to wear. So maybe I was allowed to wear those white pants on Easter, but my shirt had to have some level of flowers on it, and then we balanced it all out. When I hit my college years, that was really stepping out into a new time in my life. My senior year of high school, I became so depressed that I made this decision that since I was never going to be able to be who I wanted to be, that I just didn't want to be alive anymore. And that was the year that I attempted to commit suicide. I had lost all my friends. I had been fired from my job. All the girls that I worked with had got together and wrote a letter to my boss and said that they didn't want to work with me anymore because I made them uncomfortable. They just didn't want to be around me, so I was fired. So I had this situation where when I was in school, no one wanted to talk to me or sit near me, and when I went home, I didn't have my job anymore, and I didn't have anywhere to go, and my mom would often ask me, like, why aren't you hanging out with your friends anymore? And I couldn't look at my mom and say, like, I'm not hanging out with these people because I don't want to hang out with them. Like, I'm not hanging out with them because they don't want to be my friend. But I couldn't say that to my mother. I knew that would just, like, break her heart. So I just, thankfully, the suicide attempt did not come to fruition, and I told myself that if I could just push through the rest of my senior year and make it to college, I would be able to just start a new life and be myself, and that's what happened. I went away to college. I met other people who were in the LGBT community for the first time. I made real friends for the first time who knew fully who I was. I started to be able to experiment with wearing what I wanted to wear and being who I wanted to be with no judgment. And this was a huge breath of fresh air for me because it was a really hard few years in a Catholic high school where at least once a day, every day, I had someone in a position of power standing in front of me saying, "You'll go to hell if you are this." You know, there are rules that are written in this book that we read every day and we go through, and we talk about how this is wrong and this is not what you're supposed to be. And this was the first time that I had broken away from that and saw a whole different part of the world. And it was amazing, and it was a feeling that I never wanted to lose. And I made the decision right then and there that I was now going to live my life being my fully authentic self. No matter what people said, no matter what obstacles came in my way, I was just going to be the very best person I can be. And I discovered that I am my best self when I am myself. The only way that I am successful and achieving and capitalizing on every opportunity that comes my way is when I'm my authentic self and putting my authentic self out here. Because I can tell you right now, if I was standing on this stage in a pink dress, I would be extremely uncomfortable. And I'll guarantee the rest of you would be just as uncomfortable looking at it. Thank you.